All right, to begin, let's address some basics about communication and how communication works. Communication starts with an individual, you, me, anybody, having a thought and wanting to communicate that thought to others. When this occurs, it's called sending the message, and this can take many forms. It can be face-to-face, with nonverbal communication also being involved. It can be via video conference where verbal communication and nonverbals are involved. It can be a telephone call where only verbal communication is involved. It can be an email when only written communication is involved, or an instant message or text message for very quick communication. Again, no nonverbals or verbals are involved. It can be a presentation to a group of people where it takes a lot of preparation to do that right. And there are other forms of communication, obviously. The bottom line is, a sender is sending a message through a selected medium to communicate to somebody else who receives the message, and then they have to interpret it and make meaning from it. While that may sound simple, it's not. It's easy for a well-intended message to get poorly communicated or miscommunicated so that the message received is not the message that was intended to be sent. Every day we're involved with verbal communication with others, but very often we say things that should not be said, say things in a way that is not helpful, and hear others say things that should not be said either. The bottom line is, with effective verbal communication, we must be sure to be clear about what we want to say and how we want to say it before we say it. This means that for most of us, we'd be better off just not responding to others, what others say initially, but be a little bit more reflective and more intentional in our verbal communication. So think before you speak. Think about what your intent is with your communication and what you are attempting to accomplish through communication. And this is particularly critical for leaders. Some tips for effective communication for leaders. First of all, know your audience. It's critical to know your audience, who you're communicating with. Knowing your audience and their needs is critical for effective communication. One of the primary objectives in communicating in organizations or with teams is giving others the information they need to be informed and to take action. Another issue to consider with your audience is what the current state of mind is of your audience members. Are they happy? Are they angry? Are they concerned? Because that all plays into how they're going to understand and filter what you say. Sometimes a listener's state of mind can act as a powerful filter to being able to hear the message or what's being said in it. When possible, use the experience of the audience in communicating effectively with them. So if you can link to their past experience, that makes a big difference in it becoming more real and relevant for them. Okay, another point, the use and misuse of jargon and acronyms. We're all guilty of using too much jargon and acronyms, and it doesn't really matter your age, the organization you work with, the organizations you're familiar with, etc. The use of jargon and acronyms, they're okay in-house with people who understand, but it's not okay when people are unwilling or unable to communicate without the use of jargon and acronyms with others that don't understand that. So we need to be able to flex our communication style to meet the needs of the audience to whom we're communicating to. This may sound very basic, but you see this happen all the time. Consider the following. Don't use jargon or acronyms when possible, and if you're going to use one, be sure to operationally define it. Let people know what it means. Give people the information they need in layperson language. Use visual imagery or stories to help them relate the message you're communicating. And step in when you see they're having difficulty with an aspect of a message that they don't seem to understand and you can help with. When it gets down to it, effective communication is about connecting and establishing relationships. Effective interpersonal communication often begins with face-to-face interaction, and face-to-face communication is about relating to others and communicating with them effectively. Now, having said that, use nonverbal communication when possible. Most people don't realize it, but most human communication is nonverbal, meaning it's visual. So our body language, the body language, the things we do, those things communicate to others at a level that we're typically not fully aware of, but it communicates very clearly to most people the idea of this person's a friend, this person cares, this person's a threat, whatever it is. Some examples of this are our facial expressions, our body movements, our eye contact. Please know that nonverbal communication varies from culture to culture. But make no mistake, people can tell if you're happy, you're angry, you're frustrated, agitated, busy, engaged in conversation, etc. The bottom line is we must first be aware of the impact of nonverbal communication and try to understand what we are communicating with that to others. The importance of nonverbal communication is critical, and if you have access to it, use it. With telephone, teleconference, email, etc., you'll not have access to nonverbal communication, but you will be able to use nonverbal communication in face-to-face communication or even via video conference call. Here are some do's and don'ts. Do face the speaker. Do have eye contact. Do use appropriate gestures to acknowledge that you're listening to people. And you got to learn what's appropriate from country to country because that does change. And do lean forward into the speaker. Things not to do: don't look away, don't look disinterested, don't look bored, don't multitask, meaning check your email, take a phone call, text, etc., as this communicates disrespect. Multitasking is often seen as rude to the other party, and it shows a general level of disinterest. Being interrupted for other tasks shows them clearly how important you are, and that typically means that you're not very important if they're taking a phone call, if they're texting somebody else. Be clear about what you're seeing regarding nonverbal communication and attempt to be clear about what's being communicated and be empathetic to that. To do that, you really need to be effective in terms of being sensitive to the feelings of others, because the underlying feelings are often at the root of nonverbal communication that you're seeing. So good emotional intelligence skills can help with that. Those can also diffuse an angry person and ultimately save a relationship. Use your active listening skills to let other people know you're listening and engaged in his or her dilemma with them. You'll learn more about active listening in the next video. The way we speak is also important. The way we speak is part of how we communicate. While the content of the message is certainly important, more important is the way we say something. The issues of how loud we speak, the vocal intensity of the words spoken, the speed at which we speak, and even the lack of speech, meaning silence, all impact communication with another person. We routinely communicate to others that we're bored or excited or angry or happy or shocked or comfortable. You get the idea. So use your vocal skills in communicating intentionally. Some considerations in speaking to groups. Now, leaders need to learn to speak in front of groups. That's just part of the deal. Speaking in front of others is often something people are afraid of, but there's really no need to be afraid. Confidence in public speaking is developed through practice, and it's developed over time. It doesn't just happen overnight. Here are some things that'll help. Prepare what you want to say. It doesn't mean you're writing out things word for word, but prepare the points you want to talk about in your speech and the order in which you want to deliver those points. Know your audience. Knowing your audience helps you prepare the speech, and to be successful with it, you know what they value and believe in. This helps guide the development of your speech. Learn how to begin and open your speech, and learn how to finish and close your speech. A well-communicated speech should be clear, complete, targeted toward the intended audience, honest, tactful, and straight to the point. Know that you're communicating yourself to others. That's true with everything you do. To be effective in communicating with others, you need to be able to communicate the person you are accurately. This requires being genuine, self-aware, and able to express yourself honestly. In my experience in effective communication, adults have a built-in garbage detector and can quickly identify any lack of genuineness or hidden agenda or intent to deceive. So be truthful with your communication and relationships with others. This provides a lot of positive benefits for you. You build credibility with others, and you never have to worry about being caught in a lie. Use humor in communication. Now, humor in communication in human relationships, it's not about telling a good joke. It's about finding the humor, laughter, fun we have every day as we see ourselves. A couple of useful points for using humor effectively in the workplace include: never make another person the target of your humor. unless they're a close friend and you know that they will interpret the humor the way it's intended. It's generally better to make yourself the point of the humor, and this doesn't mean you make yourself look incompetent, but rather you end up making yourself looking more human to your audience. Use of stories. When you can, use stories to get points across. In business and almost all organizations that have existed for some time, there's going to be stories. Listen for these stories because the stories often communicate the values of the organization or the team. Sometimes the parameters for what is acceptable behavior within the organization get told in these stories. For leaders, the use of stories can be highly effective in you making your point or having your audience remember it. So remember that while there are different kinds of stories, the intent of most organizational stories is to teach a value. So listen up when these stories are told and use stories effectively to make your point stick. Stories may be used effectively to have employees reflect about core values in the organization or within the team, consider a different mindset about a topic, engage the audience member with follow-up questions. The bottom line is that stories help us communicate and create relationships from communication, so use them when possible. Some types of questions can also help improve communication. To be effective in communication, you need to know the types of questions that help and the types of questions that do not help the communication process. Generally speaking, closed-ended questions requiring a yes or no answer or that are judgmental are to be avoided, and open-ended questions that inquire about the needs of the stakeholders, the expectations of the people, or challenges that they face tend to open up dialogue and can prove very beneficial in effectiveness in communication. The use of questions can be extremely useful if prepared in advance with clarity about the issues involved and be clear about the information objectives that you hope for from asking those questions. It's important when you communicate with others to suspend judgment of others. As much as possible, keep judgment out of your mind as you listen to someone else's message, because people can tell when they're being judged, particularly non-verbally. If you're judging as you listen, you're only hearing part of the sender's message, and you'll probably be communicating your judgment to the sender non-verbally. Judging and delivering unrequested solutions and a lack of concern for others are problematic to effective communication. In fact, these three often end up being communication enders and sometimes relationship enders. People just cut it off and they stop. There's also the issue of physical distance in communication, and this varies by country, just to let you know. Effective communication requires a level of comfort between the speaker and the person receiving the message. And the bottom line is you need to determine the physical distance that's acceptable in the country you're in which you work and adhere to. So if you do, if in the future you go overseas, if in the future you're in another country, you're going to find that the physical differences do change. When you're unclear about what someone's trying to say, you should really try to clarify that. And what I mean by that is ask a question to clarify the communication. This lets the person know you're trying to understand his or her message. Be sure the question you ask is non-judgmental and open-ended, and this allows the person to express themselves freely. Okay, coming to the end of this, when you're criticized, if someone criticizes you, do your best to accept the comments from the other person. Honest criticism is often indicative of a strong relationship. In fact, my guess is probably the most honest criticism you've got is from members of your family or your close friends. But it's easy to get angry and it's easy to get defensive. Honest feedback is actually an act of caring, but unfortunately many people receiving the feedback don't see it that way. Don't let yourself be one of them. Remember, one moment of anger can hurt a relationship permanently. Choose your words carefully. Be well-intentioned in what you say. Show tact, manners, and how you say it. Do not hurt others with words. Too often something that gets said hurts someone even when that's not intentional. Caring makes a difference in communication. If people know that you care and they can sense it, they'll be much more open to any communication you have with them. If you're able to show caring and respect in your communication, it will pay great dividends for you in the quality of your work relationships, the level of ease and working with others, the resistance, meaning the lack of resistance encountered in working with others, and certainly in more career opportunities for yourself because of your ability to communicate when job positions open. Some final comments, final communication hints, if you will. Consider how to best serve others in your team, in your organization, the people with which you work. That will go a long way in terms of helping your mindset when you communicate with others. In groups, help others be heard and understood. Sometimes people will sit on the sideline and not say something. Ask them questions directly to be sure that their voices are heard. If a conversation is going to be about a difficult topic or a sensitive topic, if you can, talk with the person one-on-one, because I'm sure that's the way you would like for it to be handled. A theme through all these tips about effective interpersonal communication is to consider the other person and put yourself in their shoes. Basically, you're trying to treat others the way you'd like to be treated. And with that said, this concludes the Solomon Communication video on effective communication basics. Thank you.